Hello, good evening. My name is Evan Pfallenberg, and I'm delighted to be together this evening, sort of, with Eileilet Tzabari and Matti Friedman. I'm not going to do any introductions because we have so little time, but Matti and Eileilet both have websites, and we're all to be found on Wikipedia and other places online. So if you're interested in who we are and what we write, you can find us. Before we get to the main topic at hand, I'd like to note that the three of us have something in common, and that's an association with the Sami Rohr Prize for Jewish Literature. Matti won the prize for nonfiction in 2014, and Eileilet won the prize for fiction in 2015, which means that they each walked off with $100,000. And I'm a judge for the prize, so I walked off with a growing collection of wonderful Jewish books. No hard feelings, guys. In any case, we've all won or been shortlisted for prizes and overlooked for other prizes that maybe we would like to have won. And my question to you two this evening, first question, is what significance does the awarding of prizes have in your life as a writer, either while you're writing or possibly after you finished a manuscript? Matti, how about if we begin with you?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure to be here, even if here is just my own house, staring at my laptop. The significance, I guess, is double. One is that you spend a lot of time as a writer by yourself. You're not sure if what you're writing means anything to anyone, and winning a prize is one way that the world tells you that what you've written is something that's worthwhile, and that's very nice, and it helps you keep writing. For me, there was an additional advantage to winning this prize, which came with the fact that it's a prize that isn't just a certificate. It comes with money. And what the money means for a writer who wants to be independent is that you will have a chance to write the things that you really want to write and that you think are important. If you're a journalist in Israel, which I am, you are basically going to be stuck writing stories that other people want you to write. And those stories can be pro-Israel propaganda, and they can be anti-Israel propaganda, and they can be all kinds of stripes of propaganda in between, but often it's going to be someone else's narrative, and you're not going to be in control of the story. And what winning the Sami Rohr Prize meant for me was that I was now in control, and I could tell the stories about Israel that I wanted to tell. I had that freedom, and I've written two books since that first book that won the prize that have allowed me to write stories that I would not have been able to write had I not been given the independence that came with winning that prize. Those are the two main aspects of it for me.
Great. Ian?
I have to agree. I don't know if I have much to add to those two points that Matti made. But first of all, I should say thank you for having me. And it's so great to see you both. I don't say it lightly. It really did change my life. I remember the time that they called me to tell me that I was nominated. I was debilitated at the time. I threw my back out really badly, and I was lying in bed feeling really sorry for myself. I was unemployed. Things were not looking very brightly. And it was after a couple of years in which my book was, the book came out a couple of years before that, and it didn't really win many accolades. It did okay as far as first books of short stories go, and I was pleased with the attention that it got, but I felt like it was basically over for it, and then suddenly that happened. So it not only it allowed me to take time and write and hire childcare. I was also a young mother at the time, so it allowed me to write the next book, the memoir that just recently came out. It also awarded me a book deal with Random House. So it really did, it was the life before and the life after. It's very cut and dry for me.
And for both of you, the expectations aren't a little daunting? I mean, I have a friend who his sixth book was chosen as an Oprah book, and suddenly, wow, his career changed in really remarkable ways. And I remember him saying once that he missed the days when he could just sit down and write what he wanted to write. But now there were all kinds of expectations on him. And of course, we all look at him like, yeah, we'd like to have that problem too. But, you know, there aren't there, you know, sort of expectations after you start winning some really nice prizes, or is it all worth it anyway?
I do sometimes tell people that there is a privilege in writing your first book when, you know, you don't even know if it will ever be read. And when I say that to students who are just starting out, I know that it sounds like, just like you said, like, oh, come on, you know, boo-hoo. It sounds like a good problem to have, but it's true. You know, you'll never be able to write another book, even if you didn't win a bunch of awards. You'll never be able to write the next book the same way. Yeah.
I write for myself, and it's a privilege that I feel that I've done through, I'm working on my 4th book now, and each time I feel over and over again that I'm writing a book because it's something inside of me that just feels like it needs to come out, whatever thing I'm exploring or curious about, or and so it feels like a luxury that there aren't those expectations, and I really like that. But a friend of mine in the States, a writer in the States who's a short story writer predominantly, told me once that she feels that in her writing life, if you take 100% of the time that is her writing life, she says 50% of that time is writing, and the other 50% is promotion of some kind. Whether that's being on the road or writing pieces that go along with, or answering, you know, speaking to book groups, whatever. So, and I remember being very surprised. It's a little different for a novelist, but, you know, those numbers are a little daunting. And yet, promotion in a sense is part of the book world today. And I think we're all conscious of it, and we sometimes profit by it too.
Mm-hmm.
I've been made very aware in recent months of the particular role of the writer during the corona pandemic, because if you look at doctors and nurses and they're ministering to the sick, in a sense, writers have been called on to write for this or that institution or publication. And I think of this as a kind of literary citizenship, which has taken on a new role, maybe a greater role. And in a sense, it can also take us away from our usual writing. So have you been called upon to write corona pieces in some way, reacting for the world? Or have you felt your own need to write something about the situation today? Mate, I'm going to go back to you again.
Sure, it's a short answer, no.
Wow. Okay.
I can elaborate if you want. I think that it's a bit, everyone's writing about it, of course, and if you're a daily journalist, you have no choice but to, you know, to cover it. But if your job is to kind of take the long view and write more significant pieces, I'm not sure that there's anything to say about it quite yet. It's too, you know, it's happening now. And I don't think we really know what it means. So other than, you know, commenting in a very banal way on things that we all know, which is that we're stuck at home and, you know, the normal world has gone on hiatus, I'm not sure that there's that much that's particularly interesting that a writer who's not covering daily news can really say at the moment. And I think it's probably a mistake to really try to say something too quickly. I think big events they really become a subject for good writing maybe 10 years after they happen. A good example is the First World War. Really good books about the First World War start coming out a decade after that war. And that's when people can really start putting things into perspective. Things that are written too quickly are, you know, decent as daily journalism, but probably don't have that much lasting value.
I'm sure that's true, but I mean, here are two of the pieces that I was asked to write. One was for a collection of Corona stories from around the world, somebody in Holland was putting together. And another was looking for a short observation or confession, no longer than 2 pages, that speaks to pandemic experiences that are a little out of the ordinary. So nobody's looking for the long view there. Nobody's looking for you to, you know, have it all figured out, but they're looking maybe for a little bit of sustenance, succor for an audience out there who would like something wise, insightful to be said to them. And but you feel you stand on your answer? No?
Yeah, the one guy who did do a good job, though, pretty early on was David Grossman, who wrote a really nice...
He did. That's totally true. Yeah.
Essay. And then I read that and I was like, wow, the ability to look at something that's this fresh and to say something that's smart is really admirable, but I don't have it.
Okay. So I was asked to write something, and I was hesitant, to be honest. It was for a Canadian magazine called Maclean's. And I was hesitant, and I think I basically did that both to challenge myself, because I like doing that, Hebrew speaking person who writes in English, but also because frankly, I was concerned about income, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take the money, I'll write anything. What I wrote and how I wrote it kind of mirrored each other in a sense. I wrote of my experience from the Gulf War, which it's at the very early days, it reminded me of it a bit. But also I ended up with the things that gave me comfort. And I wrote about how I took comfort in living small and in living in the moment. And that's kind of what I did when I wrote that piece. I didn't go long view. I went very small and very personal. And I talked about embracing the uncertainty. And I was telling someone the other day that I think maybe this is the time for, fiction writers and novelists to shine, because I feel like we're pretty good at uncertainty, first of all, because it's such a precarious job. And also because there's something about taking on a long project like this, especially for someone like me who doesn't really outline. And you don't know where it's going, and you don't know how it's going to end. And the stories just kind of, you follow the words and you follow the images. Or maybe it's just me, but there's something about, the exercise of letting go that is writing a novel, I feel like, or a full-length book, that something about that, I feel like it prepares us for the uncertainty of the situation.
I also think that I often write, I love that, what you said, I think that I want to write things that I want to read, and the last thing that I want to read right now is people stuck in their stupid rooms looking at their computers. But I really want to read about Lawrence of Arabia, you know what I mean? I want to read about adventures in vast open spaces. That's what I'm looking for, and that's, I think, why I don't want to write about my actual life right now, which is, not.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm calling myself a Corona recluse. And some of the people in my life are calling it me that as well, because I've actually turned down, that's my confession for the evening, I've turned down those requests to write pieces that I just feel like I want to be somewhere else. And the somewhere else that I want to be is in my fictional world. In the place that, I'm creating, I'm designing, and not in the world that we're having to deal with at the moment. And unfortunately, I guess that's not being a good literary citizen. I'm kind of aware of that, but I just sort of say, well, the David Grossmans of the world who are, giving some great answer that's really going to speak to a lot of people, or Iyelet, I haven't read your piece, then they're thank you very much. They're doing the job for the rest of us who haven't risen to the call. So how has this affected your usual writing, your fiction, your nonfiction? And will Corona work its way into the writing that you're doing now or in the future, do you think? How's it going to affect you as a writer? Iyelet, you this time first.
I hope not. I don't really want to write fiction about the coronavirus. Like writing a short essay for my claims, that was one thing, but I've never been one to write about or read. I'm not really interested in reading, pandemic stories. It's just not what I go for. Give me love stories. You know what I mean? Like, give me migration stories.
Love in the time of Corona. I mean, there are lots of possibilities there.
Not for me. Someone else is welcome to do that. Unfortunately, I was interested when you said that you're writing now and you're still in your novel, and I'm curious to hear about your experience actually, and how it affected your experience writing a novel that I assume you started before all of this. Unfortunately for me, I haven't been writing my novel at all in the past few weeks or months or whatever long it's been. The first reason for that is simply, just the reality of the situation. It turns out that being a creative writing teacher is a really good job to do during a pandemic. Who knew? I've gotten most of my work that was already ongoing moved online, but I actually got a lot of other offers from universities and institutes in Canada that realized that suddenly it doesn't matter where I live. So I've been working quite a lot. That's the first reason. And the second reason is I haven't even looked at it, and it feels, I don't know how to look at it right now through the lens of everything that is going on. It's
like insignificant, you mean?
Inconsequential or yeah, it's just, I feel like it will pass. I'm not actually concerned. I mean, it's a historical novel. It's from the 90s.
Mm.
It kills me that it's a historical novel. So I don't think it actually should affect it, but it's still so weird. It does affect it in a sense because it's the future of my characters. You know what I mean? It's in their future. And when I was writing it before, it wasn't in the future of my characters.
Right.
Because my characters are alive, right? And so I think it would just take a little bit of a shift once I have the time to delve back into it. And I think about it all the time, and I really want to go back there. But yeah, I feel like it would require a little bit of a shifting in
yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
How about you, Mati?
I think that if there's one thing that that will remain in some way is this increased focus on where you are and where you live. And I think we end up moving around a lot. You do, Evan, and I do as well. And suddenly we're not moving. You are where you are, and you're not just in your country, but you're on your street, and you're in your apartment building, and you're looking at the same bush, across the street, and noticing flowers that are appearing there. And it's very it's a very narrow, intense focus on one place. And that actually could be good for writers who maybe move around a bit too much. I just finished reading a book. Coincidentally, I did not read it because of the Corona quarantine, but I read a book by Meir Shalev called, in English, it's just come out in English, it's called My Wild Garden. In Hebrew, Ginat Bal. And it's just a book about his garden. It's about him tending flowers in his garden. And he finds incredible drama and life and history and excitement in this small garden that he has. And there's something there. There's something there that I hope I can preserve in my writing after this is over. And I think we might see it in the work of other people as well, who are kind of being chained to one place. And there's some benefit. There's some benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I'd been only thinking about my new novel. I hadn't started writing it. And in a sense, Corona came along and enabled me to do that. Iyelet, I don't have small children at home, so that's a big difference. Mine are big enough to leave me alone for long periods of time. And I was supposed to be in Iceland for the month of April. 3 weeks of that was going to be writing this novel, and 1 week of that was supposed to be spent on the north coast of Iceland, figuring out the choreography for a scene that takes place in the novel. And it's crucial, and I felt that I needed to walk it through and, see everything, smell everything, hear everything. And when that fell through, I realized I was going to have to, I started scheduling, thinking, when in the coming year can I get to Iceland instead of now? And then I thought, no, you know what? Just write it. And I sat myself down and I wrote that scene. Later I will go and I will check, or I will ask people who have been to this tiny island off of Iceland for their input to make sure that I'm getting it all right. And it reminded me of the armchair novelists. I mean, I, right from the beginning, have made trips to follow my characters, to see situations so that I could, you know, really experience. And we're back to a different kind of writing. But something else happened in the writing which surprised me, which was that Corona actually helped me make a shape out of the narrative that I hadn't seen before. And there is a before Corona and an after Corona to this novel. So me, who doesn't even try to stay away from topical events, somehow, you know, like in our lives, we didn't want this to happen. And it's, you know, these things worm their way in and into our psyches and now into our writing. So we'll see what comes of it. I'm a little afraid of a year from now when everybody's handing in their Corona novels and the publishers are overwhelmed. Who knows what that's going to be like? They're going to be looking for anything but the Corona novel. So, but try predicting the publishing world. I've never been able to.
No.
So what are you going to be working on after this? Or, you know, when you're coming out, Iyelet, you mentioned a novel. Mata, you haven't told us what you're working on now. Share a little bit with us, please.
I have a few journalistic projects that I'm working on. I do nonfiction, and I have a longer project that I've been working on for a while, something that's connected to the Yom Kippur War. And I've been writing some photojournalistic pieces. I just wrote a piece about the death of the Labor Party and the death of the Israeli labor movement through some very interesting murals that have been discovered on different kibbutzim. So I'm trying to, you know, keep some journalism going while writing the word Corona as few times as possible. And I hope that you know, I hope that this thing will play itself out pretty soon, so we can all get back to writing about the things we want to write about and not write about Corona. And let's just hope the book,
the inconsequential stuff that Iyelet mentioned before.
Yes.
And we just have to hope that the book industry and bookstores and the economy and planet Earth, you know, are still around in a year or so we can get back to writing stories. It's such an all-encompassing experience, and the whole world is involved in it. So it's really hard to believe that, you know, that in a year it might be a more distant memory, and people will want to hear about things that they wanted to hear about before. But I definitely hope that that's true. A world where all we're talking about is Corona, and a world where we're expected to be good literary citizens. I mean, that sounds dystopian to me. You know, I don't want to be in a world of good literary citizens. It sounds like Canada. Canada for a reason.
Iyelet, so what are you working on?
It's a bit too early, I think. I mean, I've been working it forever. When will it not be too early? But it just, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it much. Like I said, it takes place in the 90s. It does touch on the missing Yemeni babies affair in some ways. The assassination of Rabin happens sometimes around it. So there are some major events in it, but they're just not pandemic related.
Right. So when we had first started talking about this conversation we were going to have, we had entertained the idea of talking about our relative, you know, where we come from and where we are as writers, and in terms of language and culture and everything. And it's too big a discussion for the few minutes that we have left, but I would like to toss out just one last question before we break up about that. And just, you know, for the audience, to put this in a little context, you have Mati and I are both North American born, both came to Israel as young adults, and didn't grow up speaking Hebrew, and chose to live here in Israel and write in English. And Aiyelet was born in Israel to a Yemeni Jewish family, went in her 20s to Canada, lived there for a number of years and began writing in English, and then now is back in Israel and still writing in English.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear from both of you just a little bit about your writerly identity through the language and culture, through the fact that we're all citizens of two different countries, two different languages, and two different cultures at the very least.
It's funny that Ayelet and I have the opposite story. We were talking about that before. I was in Toronto and I came to Israel, and I was born in Israel, and then she moved to Toronto, and I married an Israeli, and she married a Canadian.
That's right. That's right.
Unfortunately, Ayelet scrambled this beautiful opposite parallel story by coming back to Israel. So now I actually have to move to Canada if we're going to keep.
And that's not going to happen.
I do that. But I think that what's amazing about Ayelet is her ability to write in a language that isn't her native language. And that is so rare. I mean, there's some examples. The early Hebrew writers, of course, Bialik and Chernichovsky, and those guys are writing in their second or third language. Joseph Conrad wasn't a native English speaker, but there are very few examples of people who can really pull it off. And I'm always blown away by people who can, because I've tried to write in Hebrew over the years, and I have my Hebrew is technically okay, but it's not the writing just isn't
perfect.
Good enough. Yours does, so I'm jealous. And
there's so much to say about this. First of all, thanks, Mati. But I feel like I don't have enough time, but it's interesting to me because I do feel like, we talked about literary citizenship. I feel like that duality, I am a part of a writing community in Canada. I've been a part of the Israeli writers community for the past few years, even though I'm always a little bit on the side because you're right, I write in a different language. I like that's what I do. That's what I write about. I write from one country about another country. I write in one language about another language. So there's fluidity there, and it suits me. It's something that I've learned to love. It inspires my work. And now, in a sense, like the borders have actually come down even further. If before I had to fly a lot, and to be honest, it was exhausting. I know, Mati, you did that a lot too, flying to give lectures and promote, like Evan was saying. Now I do more, more things digitally. So I love it, and it allows me to actually be more present here, and appreciate my little world here while also still being a part of the community in Canada and in the US. I'm doing a reading series in New York next, a couple of weeks from now, and participating in festivals. It's kind of wonderful. So I love being able to be a part of this and not leave my home in Yemen personally.
Well, I do hope that in the near future, we will be able to get together on a stage and maybe discuss this issue or others, perhaps back at Mishkenot or elsewhere. And I want to thank both of you for being part of this discussion this evening. And thanks to Moti and Paulina and Karen and Tali and Liran for figuring out how to hold this festival against all odds. Thanks to all of you who are viewing as well. See you soon.
And thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Thanks, Aileen.
My pleasure. Good night.